All right, welcome to the show. Others receiving votes. My colleagues, Gene Wojciechowski and Bryan Fischer. I'm Pat Forde. And man, oh man, on October 9th, there is a lot going on. So we are going to follow the hallowed media tradition of building them up to tear them down. There is a tire fire to address in Chapel Hill. There's angst in Austin over Arch and everyone else on the team. There's also intrigue over who's going to play quarterback in Red River for Oklahoma. We've got some new NCAA rules to rant about. We've got some extreme coaching carousel scenarios to go through.
Oh, yeah.
We got winners and steak dinners to pick. And we are going to discuss trying to get married via billboard. Fellas, you ready?
Right up until the very end, I was.
Stay prepared.
Okay.
Head on a swivel, Gino.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. Well, we got to start in Chapel Hill where, things are going extremely well when at 9:36 Wednesday evening, the school puts out via social media statements, one-sentence statements from Bill Belichick. I'm fully committed to UNC football and the program we're building here. And athletic director Bubba Cunningham. Coach Belichick has the full support of the Department of Athletics and University. The truly dreaded vote of confidence there. The everything is fine. No need to worry. The ships are still sailing. The trains are running on time. We'll see. Basically, this was a we're on to Berkeley statement, but are they? I mean, the team supposedly is headed to play Cal this weekend, but man, oh man, there is a lot going on there. Was a WRAL, multimedia, radio, TV, digital writing place that had a kind of a bombshell story about total dysfunction basically within the program. We already know the Tar Heels are bad, right? They're bad on the field. They're 2-3. They have been routed by the three power conference teams they've played. We've got people ripping general manager Michael Lombardi. We have people ripping Belichick's son Steve, the defensive coordinator. We have people ripping Bill himself. It's gotten so bad that nobody's even ripping Jordan Hudson anymore because there's so many other people to rip. So losing was not unexpected. Losing this badly has been shocking. Losing this badly with the off-field stuff is where this has really gotten bad, and it feels like we have a toxic stew simmering in the old well on campus. Gino, can UNC pull out of its shame cycle, or is Chapel Bill about to be one and done, or even less than one and done?
Well, first of all, this is a total accident that I'm wearing Carolina blue today, okay? I actually just pull it off the shelf and put it on, so there's no greater meaning to this. But I think after those two heartfelt Kremlin statements late last night, I think we're good. I think we can move on to the next topic, don't you?
Sure, yeah.
I think the happiest guy in America is probably James Franklin right now. No one's talking about him, so he's thrilled what's going on. Let me read you another statement, okay? Just humor me for a moment. This is from Bubba Cunningham. Coach has led the Carolina football program back into the national conversation as we improved the program's facilities, significantly increased the size of the staff, invested in salaries, and bolstered our nutrition and strength and conditioning programs. He has also been a dedicated fundraiser, strengthening the football endowment while also supporting our other sports programs. Is that an endorsement of Bill Belichick? No. Let me read the rest of it. We thank Coach Brown for his dedication to Carolina and wish him, Sally, and their family all the best. So you have to take these nothing burger statements for what they're worth. Remember, Bubba Cunningham gave Mac Brown an extension in 2023 and a year later fired him. So they're paying Mac Brown $15 million basically in go away money. And now they're facing the possibility of, if you cut the cord on Belichick, of paying him the $10 million he's getting this year, plus another $20 million. So I guess the question I would ask is, if the buyout weren't there, and of course it is there, but if the buyout weren't there, would we even be having this discussion? Would Carolina have already said thank you, and would they have just had an honest conversation and said, you know what, we thought it would work out, you thought it would work out, and it's just not working out, so let's just shake hands and go our separate ways? I would be surprised if he's let go during this season. Doesn't mean they can't do it, but I would be surprised if he didn't at least see it through the season. But as you mentioned, Pat, all the signs, all those toxic signs that we see all the time that usually lead to an ugly departure are all there. And you mentioned the losses on the field. To me, what really has caused all these different reports and all the swirling rumors are all the losses off the field. That's the thing that I think ultimately could see the end of a very brief Bill Belichick regime.
Well, how many times do you think those 12 words that he had in that statement were workshopped between and approved? How many steps went through to get those? I mean, to me, that this is the biggest stain on Bill Belichick's legacy in terms of how this has happened, the end of his Patriots tenure. Like, this is a great case of not knowing when to retire. Like, this is why Nick Saban got out at the time that he did. Not necessarily the peak, but he understood that it is difficult to have a good exit in really any level of football. And I think that Bill Belichick is reconfirming this. I mean, this, not only not understanding some of the aspects of the college game, but really not hiring a lot of guys that had college experience that could have taught him, hey, no, you've got to go, message the recruits. You've got to talk to their families. You got to do the bare minimum things that every other coach in America is doing, that UNC simply has not in a lot of aspects. And I think that's been the biggest issue for all the bluster and the talk about, oh, we're going to be the 33rd NFL team. Well, guess what? That does not work in college football. And I think we've seen that blow up spectacularly there in Chapel Hill. I don't know if they're going to move on from him after the season, but if you're Bill Belichick, you're probably almost dug in at this point. You're going to say, no, I have the nous to turn things around. And I think that's probably the biggest issue that North Carolina is going to face, is that Bill Belichick's not going to say, hey, I'm going to walk away. He's not going to say, go ahead and fire me. He's going to say, I know how to turn this around. And I think that might be the most dangerous aspect of anything that has happened in the last couple of weeks. Is not just that North Carolina is bad. It's that they think they have the answers. And we'll see about that. We'll see what the administration decides to do. But this is a tire fire, a dumpster fire, however you want to term it. And I don't think even the most pessimistic people around this experiment could have expected we would be at week 7 now, having statements from the AD and Bill Belichick at this point.
Yeah, this is obviously spiraled to that point where we see this a lot. We see the kind of the cycles of how these things work. And when you reach this point where the anonymous sources are lining up and the complaints are not just, we're bad, but everything else that's gone along with this, the toxicity has reached that level of it's really hard to fix. It's hard to come back from a situation like this. And I was talking to my SI colleague, Albert Breer, last night, who covered a lot of Belichick, but I thought he had the best comparison to what this situation looks like, just mirrored, is Urban Meyer with the Jaguars. It's an all-time great coach whose arrogance led him to believe he could go to a different level without fully preparing himself, without fully doing things differently, without fully appreciating the differences, and just think, I can do it because I'm who I am. I'm Urban Meyer. I'm Bill Belichick. And once it goes bad for somebody who thinks they have all the answers, it goes real bad. And that's what we saw in Jacksonville, and that's what this feels like here. The number of flaws here are incredible. First of all, I don't think obviously they didn't figure that they needed the best players. Okay, they got substandard players, and they're playing like a team that doesn't have talent. Secondly, I can just go get my cronies and a bunch of guys and my sons and put them on the staff, and Michael Lombardi is the GM. We'll be fine. Well, maybe not. And somebody else posited to me that as Belichick has gotten older, this happens. His circle of coaching connections shrinks, and he's got fewer people he knows, and you're turning to guys that maybe aren't the best candidates for the job of being on your staff. Thirdly, the number of people, and this is, I think, an underrated part, you guys can chime in on this, about coaching in college versus coaching in the pros. While an NFL franchise is a bigger deal than North Carolina football, there's more people connected to North Carolina football because there's a whole athletic department with hundreds of other people there with compliance and academic counseling and all that sort of thing that are involved and that have opinions and have observations and then talk to people off the record about them. There are boosters that have more say than any of the fans do in New England. There are parents of players who are chiming in left and right because they're connected to their kids in a way that the parents of a 30-year-old Patriot linebacker are not. And so there's just a whole lot more dynamics here that he's not controlling, can't control, has never encountered before.
And, Pat, we remember non-coach Bill Belichick, during his gap year, yucking it up with McAfee, yucking it up on the Manning cast, yucking it up with Saban on game day. I mean, we saw a side of him that we could kind of root for. We saw a side of him that was human. There wasn't the arrogance. There was, we could relate to him. But now he's reverted back to coach Bill Belichick. And we get the stone face and we get the 2-word answers, and he becomes really hard to root for. And I don't think he gives himself, there's no benefit of the doubt given to him other than the buyout money. Right. So I think he's done everything he can to alienate the people that he needs during a rebuild year. Does he know how to coach? Of course he knows how to coach. Does he know how to coach in college football? Well, obviously not so far. Would he be better in year 2? You would hope that he would evolve, that he would learn from his mistakes. But to your point, is he at an age and a point in his career where he's going to say, no, I know how to do this. Just listen to me and we'll figure it out. And I think that really is where the rubber meets the road on this entire question. Is he willing to evolve and change and learn and try to fix it that way? Or is he just going to be stubborn Bill again?
Well, I think the worst part is just the on-field aspect of things. There's not been any modest or even meaningful improvement from week 1 to now on the field for Carolina. And if you would have thought that of all the things you could have said about this grand Bill Belichick experiment at UNC, it's that you could see some modest improvement in the team itself. You could see some improvement in the players. You can see them actually, progressing on the field. And there's been none of that. And I think that's the most concerning thing if you are the UNC brass is that, hey, we were sold a bill of goods. And unfortunately, it's ripe produce at this point. Like the coaching aspect of Bill Belichick, the on-field improvement one-on-one with the players. And there have been, numerous reports and people have said, that have worked in and around the program that, hey, he's good with the players one-on-one. All right, well, where's the actual progress on the field? That is the bottom line of coaching. You've got to be better from week to week. And they're not taking away the opponent's best thing that they do, like they did with the Patriots. They are not having some wrinkle in the game plan that throws somebody off for the loop. And we're not talking about like the best and the brightest and the greatest of minds in the ACC in terms of the competition that he's going up against. And that to me would be the thing that if you are UNC and why you might even consider pulling the plug on this experiment early, there's not been that meaningful improvement on the field. And that to me is probably the biggest thing that anybody can point to in terms of this going wrong.
Yeah, well, the on-field product is bad, and I don't know whether it gets better, especially given the coaching staff. They apparently, are going to get on the plane and go play Cal, and after that, we'll see. Gene, you mentioned year 2. I was like, oh my gosh, could they even make it to year 2? We're not sure they can make it to the end of year 1. So,
but maybe they just don't have the players. incorporate the schemes that Belichick wants to do. I mean, it's obvious. They brought in 70 new players, and you mentioned it earlier, Pat. They're not the quality kind of players that you would expect. They didn't hit on anybody. At least we haven't seen anybody yet that looks like a real find in the portal.
Yeah, no, I mean they are at a talent deficit, and they're not being coached up well enough. And then there's everything else that goes with it. So I think this is going to be a week-to-week thing. But as long as they continue performing poorly and getting thumped, this is only going one direction. We will see if they can pull it out of the fire and play better. The schedule is not difficult, but for now, all signs are pointing towards really one of the great one-year disasters in college football history. Switching gears, and hopefully not one of the great disasters in college football history, because I don't think anybody wants to see Arch Manning referred to that way or end up that way, because there's really nothing wrong with the young man. And it's interesting now that players get paid, and the pile on is coming for Arch to a degree. They are 3-2 at Texas, a shaky 3-2, haven't beaten anybody of note, and they're going to play a pivotal Red River game against Oklahoma. The Red River history has had plenty of negative storylines that turn positive, of players and teams that were playing poorly going in and play great, get a big win, come out of it, things have changed. Sometimes only temporarily changed. I mean, like Charlie Strong was the hero of the Red River Rivalry at one point at Texas. That really didn't last. But still, this is a fascinating series, a fascinating matchup in the series. But as far as Arch and his play there, is the Manning bashing, is it over the top? And for this game, how much pressure is on Arch and Sark and the Horns? Bryan, you're going to be covering it. What do you think?
Yeah, it's definitely a little over the top. You know, Arch was not the reason that they lost at Florida, and I think it's a bigger issue for Steve Sarkisian. And look, I understand there are TV reasons why this game is at 2:30 instead of the typical 11. But if they start slow against Oklahoma, if things are a little halt and start in terms of the offense, you might get both halves of the Cotton Bowl, a well lubricated Cotton Bowl with a 2:30 kickoff. Start booing the burnt orange like that. That's kind of where the fan base is, I think, at Texas. And you know, a lot of this goes back to I think just in terms of how the team was constructed around Arch. You know, I don't think Steve Sarkisian or their very, very extensive personnel department really used and played up the fact that, hey, if you're a wide receiver, come play with Arch Manning. You know, look at Texas A&M. They went out, they got two pretty big time wide receiver additions, and that did not happen at Texas. You look at Texas Tech down the road. What did they do? They went hard in the portal in terms of landing offensive and defensive linemen, but landing some offensive linemen that can make a difference in terms of contending for the playoff. Texas did not do that. And as much as you want to kind of say, all right, let's develop our players. Let's make sure that you know what, we are the best at recruiting guys and bringing them in and turning them into NFL draft picks. That's great, but at the end of the day, you've got to do everything you can to improve your roster. And I don't think Texas did that this offseason. And that's why they're sitting at 3-2, and that's why they're struggling. You know, where are the running backs that they could have gotten? They knew they had injury issues at that position last year. They did not get the production that they wanted. That they struggled in the red zone. Why were you not out there going hard to find a running back who could maybe make the difference? You know, I think this is more of an issue around Sark than it has been Arch. And you know, he's thrown better. You know, I think he is improving from week to week. But you know, there's no question in my mind the issues at Texas. You know, this really dates back to what Sark did this offseason and not really getting the Longhorns ready to play for this season.
And yet a guy like me picked Texas and Penn State to play in the national championship and Texas winning it all. Yeah, so, yeah. You know, we have a tendency to look and think it'll be fine. They got the right guys during the off season. And so, Bryan, you make an excellent point. You know, in retrospect, they didn't. And they're not as good as we thought they were, but they can reset things this Saturday. I read a story on a national website where the writer argued that Arch Manning was a, quote, classic flop. And he based that partly on performance and partly on expectations that Arch Manning had nothing to do with. And if I'm reading it correctly, based partly on that he did too many eyeglass commercials, which, of course, is how you judge all quarterbacks after playing 7 games of their college career. He has started 5 games this season. Am I ready to call him a flop? Absolutely not. He's not even close to that. By his own admission, he has been inconsistent and underwhelming at times. Do I think he can fix it? Of course I do. And if college football doesn't teach us anything, just go back a week ago. There was a guy named Nico Iamaleava at UCLA, a quarterback that we had put so many shovels of dirt on his grave, his quarterback grave, there was no way he was ever going to get out of it. And what happens? You know, we thought UCLA was going to be a chew toy for Penn State, and Penn State loses. And Iamaleava plays fantastic, and now he's the National Player of the Week. Things change really fast in college football, and I still think there's plenty of time for things to change for Arch Manning. Certainly, he has made his share of mistakes. Certainly, he has not played well at times. But to Bryan's point, there are some issues around him that aren't necessarily his fault. So let's see what happens against OU. Win that game, and all of a sudden, things change.
Yeah. Good point. And I really disliked the column you're referring to, especially it came with, at least in the newsletter I got, with the most preposterous headline I'd ever seen. Is Arch Manning the first flop in college football? It's like, excuse me? So that, at least that, it did get me to click just to see how you could come up with something that stupid. And It was a misleading headline. But then, I thought the authors, he was making a preposterous point there, or differentiation between the hundreds of players we have seen struggle after being highly rated and, well, this guy's getting paid, so it's different. I'm not sure. I mean, I could name off 20 quarterbacks who probably felt about like Arch feels right now, of like, man, I'm catching a ton of heat. I thought this was going to go better. And people were throwing around the flop word. So, this is definitely a case where he's not playing well, but the expectations, and yes, the media drove the expectations, but guess what? Kirby Smart and Nick Saban wanted Arch Manning badly. They were sure he was going to be a great quarterback. Steve Sarkisian told Malik Murphy, you know what, you can probably hit the highway because our next guy's going to be Arch Manning. He thought he was going to be a great quarterback. He may still be a great quarterback. This is not just a media-driven thing. Coaches thought he was going to be great too. And again, maybe he still will be. And this would be a heck of a time to figure out how to play really well for him. On the other side of that game, red hot Oklahoma coming in, playing great. Brett Venables off the heart seat for now, that's for sure. But is John Mateer going to play? Had hand surgery, and now this has been like the absolute speculation gone overdrive. It's not, whether or not Bill Belichick's leaving, but whether or not John Mateer's playing in Oklahoma. And he's smartly listed as questionable by the Sooners, which means we're keeping the question in the minds of the Longhorns. They probably have a pretty good idea, probably more like probable or doubtful, but keep it questionable, and that keeps everybody guessing for as long as possible, at least till pregame warmups. And yes, the fans at least have time to come in a little more clear-eyed into the Cotton Bowl, because it's a 2:30 start as opposed to 11, because the Friday night in Dallas with those fans, oh my gosh. Woo, that's a wild one. And when that game's at 11, I feel for them. First of all, getting into the Cotton Bowl's a nightmare. And then secondly, trying to get over your hangover and watch the game and scream for your team. But this is going to be fascinating to see. In my mind, by no means would I push John Mateer to play, and I would maybe even discourage him if there's any question, because while this is a huge game and you want to play well in Red River and you want to put that gold hat on after the game as the winner, this game does not decide Oklahoma's season by any stretch. Not in a 12-team playoff era, not with the number of hard games they've got coming up. If you think putting him out there puts him at risk for the rest of the season, don't do it. You could lose to Texas and be fine. You guys, what do you think? What would you do if you're Brent Venables?
I think the whole thing about this Mateer, will he play, will he not? If he trots out there at the Cotton Bowl and he starts even throwing some passes, I think Oklahoma fans are about ready to induct his surgeon, Dr. Shin, into their Hall of Fame like this weekend. If they win. And the problem with, will he play, will he not, is they are perfectly capable of beating that Texas team without him. Like that is the one thing that I think Brent Venables and that coaching staff is keeping in mind. This figures to be a pretty low scoring team. And would John Mateer make a difference? Yes, but you are capable, I think, with what you have in terms of those weapons on offense, that you are capable of beating them, especially with, I think, a bit of a mismatch up front in terms of that Oklahoma defensive line going up against that Texas offensive line. But the thing that is in my mind is look at the bigger picture. You have that Michigan win that could be a 10-1 Michigan going into that Ohio State game in your back pocket. And you played well in that game. If you win this game, you're almost playing with house money, because you got South Carolina, you got Ole Miss, you got Tennessee, you got Bama, you got Mizzou, LSU. Yeah, that's a difficult slate. But if there's any team in the country that can maybe claim to go 9-3 and still make the playoff, it's probably going to be Oklahoma, especially if one or two of those losses end up not having your quarterback back, or say he plays poorly in terms of, all right, he comes back, he's just not ready. I think for Oklahoma, you need to hold out John Mateer. Hopefully you get a win and you walk away with that golden hat. And then you're almost playing with house money, for the rest of the month in terms of making sure that you're easing him in. Like, look at the bigger picture here. This is not just about a one-game scenario. He's from Little Elm, probably 45 minutes away from the Cotton Bowl. I know he wants to play this game desperately as somebody who grew up in the Dallas area. But you got to look at the bigger picture if you're Brent Venables, knowing that you could have a special season there in Norman, given all the pieces and given the way things have shaken out already.
There are a million ifs in this equation, obviously, but one absolute constant will be that the CFP committee will take into account, if they lose this game, that Mateer was out, that he was hurt. So that will factor into their decision. And they can win this game with Hawkins Jr., and they can win this game, as you mentioned, Bryan, with a great defense and with a de facto defensive coordinator who knows how to befuddle young quarterbacks. What did Venables say earlier this week? Mateer hasn't gone good on good, meaning he hasn't run with the number one offense and gone against the number one defense. Could that have changed between the time he said it and the time kickoff comes? Of course. But I'm with you guys. I wouldn't play him. Why not wait until next week when you're at South Carolina? And with all due respect to South Carolina, that's going to be, I don't want to say an easier game. That's a tough place to play. And South Carolina is a good team. But after South Carolina, they're playing Ole Miss, at Tennessee, at Bama, Mizzou, LSU. That's when you need John Mateer. You don't necessarily need him this week. If he's given clearance, if Dr. Shin, with the guy who's going to get his own statue outside the stadium at OU, gives him the thumbs up, literally, no pun intended, then sure, play him. But if there's any doubt, I'm with you guys. Don't play him.
Yeah, there's just too much season left, I think, there. And we'll pick that game at the end of the show here. We will also pick what even bigger game, and from the ranking standpoint, Oregon and Indiana, and several others. So stick with us for that. But for now, Producer Kent, I believe it's time for the BK Rant of the Week sound.
I'm going in. Is that clear? If you guys want to go half speed, let me know now. You're wasting my time. Get your asses going.
All right, let's get our asses going. We're going to discuss a couple of NCAA rule changes that came out this week. The first one having to do with the change of the transfer portal. Everybody loves the transfer portal. No controversy at all there. It has been compacted to a 15-day window in January 2 to 16. But there is an interesting caveat. Players who have gone through a coaching change can enter the portal only 5 days after the new head coach has been announced. An interesting wrinkle there. I certainly have some thoughts on this. Bryan, why don't you lead us off with your reaction to it?
Well, it seems completely against the spirit of why this rule was created in the first place. It's great for the ADs and the general managers in terms of helping, manage the roster. And I think, honestly, the biggest reason I think this kind of change kind of came into about was really stemming the number of mass stories in the media about players quitting, about redshirting, in terms of, all right, their coach has been fired, so they're going to redshirt and put their names in the portal later. This to me is against the spirit of why we even had this rule in the first place, and why it was good for those players that came in and said, "Hey, I want to play for this coach." You know what? This was their escape hatch, and I think this was a rule created by a lot of administrators that did not probably pass muster with a lot of the student athletes that were either on the council or other bodies that were considering this. And so I think it's it strikes me as one of another test case and another example of the administrators kind of pushing back on this player empowerment era in college football that we've had these last couple of years. The players have gotten a lot of leeway in terms of their flexibility, in terms of what they can do. And we've seen, I think, really in the last 6 months to a year, the administrators starting to push back. And I think this rule and this rule change has been another example of that.
Go ahead, Pat.
Well, my thoughts on this, yes, that this is very much pro institution, pro coach, pro AD, pushback on players like we will keep you until we get a new coach, and then we'll see if we can keep you longer than that. To me, hey, I understand the thinking behind it. I understand the strategy behind it. Guess what? Those players that want to enter the portal will be tampered with and tampering themselves with other schools behind the scenes. They're not going to sit there and say, "No, I'm sorry, coach. I'm not going to take your call till I find out for sure who my next coach is." I mean, it's going to be going on, the behind the scenes discussions, which people already say happen frequently. This will keep going. So I don't know whether this rule actually does a lot other than to give that coach time for his elevator speech with that team once he gets there. Now, there may already be deals done and players are ready to scatter the minute it happens. But this does give you a chance to walk in the door and say, "Listen, here's my pitch, guys. Stick with me."
What's the over-under on the first lawsuit filed to end this rule?
30 minutes.
I actually think the NCAA might have had their heart in the right place. Like, hey, everybody, just take a deep breath. Don't do anything rash. Give the new guy a chance to at least make his case. And then we're going to let you go if you want to go. And it prevents this mass exodus during the season, which I actually think is a semi-valid point. But I keep on going back to, if I'm a player and I'm on one of those teams where the coach leaves, why do you, the other player on the team where the coach didn't leave, gets first crack at going to someplace else before I do, and I'm in a program that's sort of upside down? We're having a coaching change. I don't understand the logic in that, and unless one of you guys can explain it to me, I'm not sure I ever will.
No, and I agree. I mean, to me, this is absolutely ripe for legal challenge, and quickly, because I think this is I'm shocked it actually passed. This is kind of like, yeah, we're going to try this, then we'll see what happens. The other rule I am shocked passed is that student athletes and coaches and staffers are now free to bet on pro sports. Still needs to be officially passed by the D2 and D3 committees, but that's going to happen from what I've been told. So if you want to bet on the NFL, the NBA, Major League Baseball, the NHL, go for it, players. Go for it, coaches. The rationale here is basically the same thing with penalizing players for smoking marijuana, is that the infractions are prevalent. This is common campus activity for normal students, and all of a sudden we're going to make it impermissible, or we're going to keep it impermissible for athletes, and we're going to find them and we're going to penalize them. And the problem is you've got a lot of athletes betting $50 or whatever over the course of a couple of weeks on NFL games, and it is completely clogging up the enforcement system when, as we know, and as Sports Illustrated has reported, there are people out there shaving points and fixing games, slightly bigger issues. And they have not really been able to devote enough manpower to that because they've been chasing a lot of these other things. However, there's some complications potentially here. Gino, your thoughts? Is common sense decision, or is this opening Pandora's box?
Oh, I think it's a fabulous idea, he said sarcastically. Okay, think about this scenario. I'm a player on whatever college team, top 25 college team, and one of my teammates got drafted in the spring and now is playing for the NFL, and I was best buddies with him. What's to stop me from calling my old former teammate and just getting a few little innocent info nuggets on that NFL game? And then maybe I share them with some of my other teammates, and maybe my old buddy asked me a question about my team and how we're going to do this week against whatever team we're facing. I just think this rule should come with a warning label. And there are so many ways this thing can go sideways. So I don't like it. I'm it doesn't. You say it's going to get passed, you think?
Yeah.
Well, again, I sort of philosophically can understand the reasons behind it, but practically speaking, I think there's all sorts of possible issues that could come up, and it could get really bad really fast.
Yeah, let's pour one out for the "Don't Bet on It" campaign that the NCAA had for years. Like that was we're definitely past that. And I mean, it is great news if you're an administrator, you're somebody who's been in the been around this for a while. Maybe the office Super Bowl squares party and games get a little more interesting nowadays around college administrators and all that. But the problem for me is just like you go, if you're in the NFL right now, when they have those rookie symposiums and when they're talking to the rookies coming in, like they beat it into their heads that you can't even get caught walking around a sports book in a casino. You can't even have just a sliver of impropriety, or at least implied impropriety. And now the NCAA is doing this. So I think it's against the message, and especially against the message that Charlie Baker has been trying to preach about trying to get gambling out of sports and out of the NCAA and out of college kids, because it is easy for a lot of those issues that we've reported on in Sports Illustrated to pop up. So I think it's almost an anti, in terms of just the message that it sends, it's against what the NCAA has been trying to do these last couple of years. And yes, I mean, I'm sure for the college kids in certain states, being able to throw $5 on a game, involving the NBA, sure, it sounds good to them, but what does that lead to? Where are we going after that? I think that's the big concern. And for a lot of these schools, you know what? Not only are you having to change kind of midstream in terms of what you've been preaching for the last years in terms of don't bet on it, don't have those apps on your phone, and now it's permissible. And guess what? This is a problem for a lot of people, not just athletes, but college kids in general. And I think it sends probably the wrong message to an entire cohort that should not be involved in this.
Yeah, that's my thought here, is just you are asking for a new set of troubles, or at least a wider set of troubles here. And I get it from an efficiency standpoint of trying to run NCAA enforcement. Okay, yes, you're writing too many traffic tickets and not catching the literal organized crime rings that are involved in gambling on college sports or fixing games. But the issues are you're making gambling more prevalent, and that will create more gambling problems. Doesn't mean everybody. It doesn't even mean a majority of people that are going to gamble are going to run into problems with it, but an increased number of problems will arise. And Gene, you laid out one of the obvious scenarios here is you're going to get inside information. You're going to give inside information more likely. You're going to make some bets you're going to lose, right? First of all, we all know why the casinos are the size they are. You're going to lose these bets, and not all the players are making NIL millions, and you're going to get into debt, and then things get sticky. How are you going to get out of situations like
chase your tail?
Yeah. Chase your tail. Listen to somebody that says, hey, you know what? Especially in basketball where things are a little easier, but just play bad the first half here, and you can get out of a problem. So a lot of issues with that. We will see how it goes, but I have a feeling that's going to be one where the unintended consequences kind of run rampant. All right, one other thing to get to before we pick some games. We'll try to run through these relatively quickly, but in desperate search for something to write about in the 40-yard dash this week, I concocted an absurd coaching carousel chain reaction. I actually did one last year, and people either liked it or hated it so much that I thought, what the hell, let's do it again. So I am going to run through 10 scenarios here, guys. I want you to listen to them, want our listeners to listen to them and decide, oh, maybe that could happen, or, my God, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. This starts with UCLA, which has an opening already, and I am sending Kalani Sitake from BYU to Westwood. He's done a really good job at BYU. He's a good fit there, but he's got a big personality that would also play well in Los Angeles. So Kalani's leaving. Now, BYU, you've got an opening, and you've got a lot of money lately. You are throwing around money on the NIL market. How about throwing some at a coach? Steve Sarkisian, an alum.
Wow.
How about it?
Wow.
I've had a lot of people say, look, he's not a Mormon. We can't have a Mormon there. You know, they have players there who aren't Mormon who've done awfully well over the years. I'm not including Steve Sarkisian. So
right.
I'm going to leave that one open as a possibility. It's a crazy long shot, but why not? Texas opens up. All right. One of the biggest jobs on earth. They're going to get the Lane train. You're following one offensive savant with another. Lane Kiffin, who's doing better and better work, I think, at Ole Miss. Jumps ship there. Mississippi opens, and we've got a coach in Happy Valley who is unhappy and needs to get out and go back to the SEC where he performed very well. James Franklin leaves Penn State for Mississippi. I acknowledge there's a couple problems with that, but let's roll with it for now. Now, Penn State needs a coach. Matt Rule, he's a Penn State alum. He's friends with Pat Kraft, the athletic director. He's going from Nebraska to Penn State. Penn State opens. What do? You look southeast to Missouri and you grab Eli Drinkwitz, who would like another SEC job to open, but guess what? It's not going to. Meanwhile, Rhett Lashley leaves SMU for Arkansas. SMU goes and gets Shannon Dawson, the offensive coordinator from Miami. Kentucky opens up because Mark Stoops is under fire and leaves to go be defensive coordinator at Ohio State because Matt Patricia goes to the NFL.
Okay.
Got that? Sorry,
yeah.
A lot there. Kentucky hires Will Stein from the city of Louisville, a former Louisville Cardinal, but I have inside sources that say his family likes the Wildcats. And then, there's going to be an opening at North Carolina. Believe it or not. This one, I'm sure, comes out of left field for you. John Sumrall goes from Tulane to UNC. And the job that doesn't come open, here's the big gag. Florida. Billy Napier's been fired every September. He's going to keep it again. They're going to run the table from here on out. They're going to finish 9-3 against the worst schedule in the country.
Wow.
Billy Napier survives again. And then one more thing just to throw in a wrench. In January, Marcus Freeman's leaving Notre Dame for the NFL. Got all that, guys? Give me your thoughts.
You're up, Bryan. Good luck.
In terms of the most unlikely, I think it's your Satake to UCLA, Sark to BYU scenario. I mean, Sark's contract.
Why you can't unspring me on the first one?
No, that's the initial domino is where you start to go wrong there, and that's not even
It ends the domino game.
Not even getting into the last domino in terms of Billy Napier's definitely fired at Florida at this point. I think that's the other thing that is hard to believe. But I mean, number one, Sark, I don't think literally cannot take that BYU job just because he's not LDS, which is a requirement there for that football coach. Why they have such a small pool of candidates, and why whenever that job comes open, it's a little bit difficult to find the right fit.
And from what I've heard, they're cross country coaches, not Mormon. So if you can have a cross country coach who's not Mormon, why do you have to have a football coach who is?
It's not necessarily the official law, rules and whatnot, but it does seem like football, men's basketball, some of those high profile sports, the AD as well. Those positions, you do have to be LDS. So I think that's the one thing where it pops in my mind. And plus Sark's contract. I mean, he's got a $60 million buyout from Texas right now. Like one of the 4 or 5 biggest buyouts in the country. He would owe $5+ million if he even wanted to leave. So like that to me is the crazy thing. And Kalani Sitake in LA, that it's hard for me to see that too, knowing him a little bit in terms of making that move. He loves the alignment there at BYU. He probably has a better job at this point in terms of being in a more winnable conference, having more support in terms of NIL, the administration there. So that the initial domino to me is the one that I'm scratching my head, and then some of the other moves, like, I mean, John Summerall did talk with UNC last year. I think that was pretty well reported in terms of having those conversations with Bob Cunningham. I don't know if he's going to jump into after the tire fire that we've just talked about in UNC, that he would say, that's a more attractive job than waiting out for another SEC gig. And and speaking of the SEC, I mean, the Kiffin thing to Texas, if that were to open, that was the most believable of the scenarios there, Pat. But outside of that, like not having Billy Napier fired at Florida was questionable. I think if you're talking about the scenarios itself.
Yes, I agree with you there.
So that to me is the one that's crazy. But I would like to see James Franklin down there in Oxford. I think that would be quite the interesting match in terms of personalities and the school fit. But John Summerall not getting an SEC gig this cycle would probably raise my eyebrow a little bit as well.
Forde, you're my boy. Okay. And I absolutely loved this whole concept. I think it's great. Do I agree with you on all of them? No, but you took some flyers. I'm sort of with Bryan. It's not so much the talking to UCLA. It's more, why would Sark leave Texas for BYU part of it? But I love the idea of it. But you don't have Kurt Signetti going anywhere. Is that correct?
Correct.
He's going to stay at IU. All right. And then Kiffin to Florida sounds more plausible to me than Kiffin to Texas.
Well, yes, because Florida's more plausible to open, of course.
Well, and I think Kiffin has sort of ties to Florida. I think he spent a lot of time there. So for non-football reasons, I think that might make sense. And then you mentioned Marcus Freeman leaving, but you didn't mention who was going to get the Notre Dame job, which I'd love to hear. Who you think?
That's 2,000 more words, man.
Okay. All right. Maybe that's next week's column. Yeah. And I'm going to can I throw 2 other scenarios at you?
Yeah.
All right. So, who reminds me of Detroit Lions coach Dan Campbell? Oregon coach Dan Lanning. So if I'm an NFL team looking for an infusion of life, I'm calling Dan Lanning. If the Florida job opens up, I'm calling Dan Lanning. And if Notre Dame opened up, maybe I'm calling Dan Lanning. And I think we can both agree that James Franklin knows how to build or rebuild a program, correct?
Yep.
Okay. Well, there's a program that just got a $50 million infusion of cash at the University of Andrew Luck. Mm-hmm. And maybe Franklin's a decent fit there. Or if North Carolina does get rid of Bill Belichick, what do you think about Franklin at Chapel Hill? Sure.
No, I mean, I'd like both scenarios for Franklin. I think that's, he's gonna be. I believe he's a guy who's going to be looking for options, and will have options. The question is, do you want to go to a place like a Stanford where it's an uphill fight in a lot of ways? Or do you want to try to get someplace where you're a little more equipped to compete right here, right now? Because that's going to be one of those things. It's going to be a little like when Calipari left Kentucky, I think, where it's going to be a divorce where both sides are like, oh, we're better off without you. And you want to show right away. You want to put it on Instagram. You're in a Ferrari with the hottest person you can find. Hey, I'm living a great life without you.
Yeah.
I don't need you anymore. So the race to win that divorce, if it happens, I think will be significant.
Well, I love it though. Great idea.
It would also be a race to buy a bigger boat if you're Jimmy Sexton or Trace Armstrong or some of the agents representing these coaches. That also struck me from this whole scenario is there's only one winner out of all this.
Yeah. All right, guys, we got to pick some games, winners and steak dinners. Updated standings. Bryan has a half game lead over Gene because Gene has the bear. So Bryan's 17-14, Gene's 17-15. I am 14-17. But read my picks in the betting column where I've like 8-2 the last 2 weeks. Come on. I mean, look, I'm doing great except for the big games that I have to pick.
You're the ones that put these on the slate.
Yeah, you're the one choosing the games.
I know. But, you got to choose the big games, right? So that's what we're doing. And we're starting with the biggest game of the week, and it's in Eugene, the Big Ten game that nobody 2 years ago thought would ever A, happen, or B, matter. Indiana getting 7.5 at Oregon. Fascinating game. I'm going to be there. I looked this up. Fernando Mendoza, who was the number 134 quarterback in the class of 2022. Yeah. Dante Moore was like the number 3 quarterback in 2023. They played against each other for different teams in a different league 2 years ago.
Huh.
That was when Mendoza was at Cal and Moore was at UCLA. Mendoza's team won big. Mendoza's team is an underdog here. Fascinating game. A lot riding for the winner. I think is in great shape. The loser, not this is basically a flesh wound. But I'll go first because I'm covering the game. I think the Oregon speed is going to be a lot for Indiana to handle. We'll see if they can match up explosive play-wise. We'll see if they can cover the excellent tight end for Oregon, Kenyon Sadiq. But I think that hook, I'm going to take the hook because I think Indiana's good, and I think it's going to be a close competitive game. So I'm going to say Oregon wins, but Indiana covers. You guys?
Go ahead, Bryan.
Well, a lot of this line has been moving quite a bit for a game of this magnitude. A lot of the, this started, I think, closer to double digits in terms of the Ducks. And, all the money is still on Oregon, which is where I am going with this game. Give me Oregon to cover the 7.5. I think Indiana keeps it close for a half, but eventually just the explosive nature and what they can do on offense, I think that's going to be the difference maker for the home team at what should be a great environment there at Autzen.
Yeah, I'm not scared by the hook either. And Autzen is a different kind of place, and this Oregon team is a different kind of team. I know Indiana boat raced Illinois, and Illinois is a legitimate team, but Oregon is at a different level. I'll take the Ducks and give the points to.
All right, Red River, Texas, 1.5 point favorite here, and don't follow our picks in actual betting advice on this, but also if you do really want to bet on this game, wait until warm-ups and you see whether John Mateer's actually going to play, because that will change everything and could skew the line in the opposite way. I would not be shocked if he's in the starting lineup if that line moves to the Sooners being favored. But for now, for purposes of this pick, Thursday, Gino, Horns giving 1.5. What do you like?
However the line ends up, I would take Texas. I'll give the 1.5 right now, but even if OU is favored, I'm taking Texas based entirely on the desperation factor. OU can, in many ways, lose this game and still be mostly okay. Texas cannot afford to lose this game. So I'm going to count on the football gods doing what football gods do in these kind of games, somehow save Texas and keep them going in this season. So desperation factor, 100% for the Texas Longhorns.
I was very much prepared to kind of follow that same line of thinking because, you know what, typically the underdog in this game, you know, there's a surprise out of nowhere, like the twists and turns of Red River, just because of the nature of that game, the split down the 50-yard line between burnt orange and crimson and cream, like it just leads to those crazy momentum shifts. And we've seen backup quarterbacks thrive in this game as well, which is why I'm going with the Sooners to cover the number. A little bit surprised in terms of, you know, just the general consensus on this game, you know, surrounding Texas, but I think that might be more Vegas at work. I don't know if the run game is there for Texas to balance things out and at least give Arch some time up front. Like that, I've seen that Oklahoma defense in person. I think that front seven is for real. I think Brent Venables is going to be able to throw some things, not only at Arch, but at Steve Sarkisian up front that really confuses them. And I think that's ultimately going to be the difference maker. It wouldn't be surprising at all to see a defensive score end up determining this game one way or another, whether it's Texas or Oklahoma. But give me Oklahoma at this point, reluctantly.
Gene, I'm going with your desperation factor as well here. And we have seen a lot of plot twists in these games. And oftentimes it seems like the team that is in disarray or not going well rises up and plays their best game. And so that's what I'm expecting from Texas here. Defensive game, not going to be high scoring. You know, whoever gets to 2 touchdowns first might win this thing. So I am taking Texas and laying the very skinny 1.5. All right, the other interesting SEC game in Como, Columbia, Missouri. Undefeated Missouri has yet to play a road game. Still at home, and here comes Alabama. The setup here for Missouri is pretty enticing. Alabama is laying 2.5. Mizzou is coming off of an open date, and before that, a spa treatment game against UMass. So they are as rested and as healthy and as prepared as they can be. Alabama is playing its 3rd straight ranked opponent, 2 of them on the road. Is that enough to sway you, Gene Wojciechowski, to go with the Tigers, or are you going with the Tide?
Emotional win at Georgia, emotional win against Vandy, now at Mizzou, but with the 3rd Saturday in October, right down the street against Tennessee.
Yeah.
Is this a game? Is this a trap game? Is this where Bama exhales? And if they do exhale, Mizzou's going to beat them. But I don't think they're going to exhale. I think it's going to still be pedal to the metal. I'll take Bama, and I'll give the points.
I'm the same. You know, I think, you know, the defensive tackle Tim Keenan coming back, he's looked healthier as the years progressed, and he's gotten more reps. You know, they only allowed 9 rushing yards in that second half to Vandy. I think they've figured out something defensively. Now it's going to be a challenge there on the road, you know, against a very good rushing attack in Mizzou, but you know, inside of a field goal, give me Alabama -2.5.
One of the reasons they only allowed 9 rushing yards is Vandy stopped even trying to run the ball after ripping off a 75-yard gain, a 75-yard touchdown, and a 36-yard gain.
Bryan, this sounds like a Mizzou pick coming up.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it is.
He's called the shot. He's called the shot for weeks now that Mizzou was going to win this game. So
yeah, I've laid out the reasons. I've laid them out. Missouri's going to be 6-0 after this and still could end up being the last undefeated team in the SEC. Tigers. All right, the other Big Ten game. Fascinating. This is a brand name game. It's a great uniform game. It's in the Coliseum. I hope, although I think maybe it's supposed to rain on the West Coast this week, which would be a shame because this is one of those games you want the sunshine and that grass to look perfect. But we'll see about that. Michigan, not perfect against USC, not perfect, but still pretty good teams. The Wolverines are getting 2.5 here in the Coliseum. Bryan, what do you think?
Give me a Michigan in this one. You know, I think there's been issues. You know, I can really only think of the LSU game in terms of, you know, when a team has been better in the trenches and better up front. You know, Lincoln Riley, he tends to come out on the losing end on this one. So if Michigan's getting, you know, 2.5 points, I think they will try to slow the tempo down. I think USC can have some success offensively, but I think that Michigan secondary getting some guys healthy. I think they're playing well, and so give me Michigan on the road until proven otherwise with the Trojans.
this is the first game at Coliseum, Pat, since 1957. I
Is
would
that
have
right?
never. That's amazing, isn't it? That many years. So Bryce Underwood's third. This will be his third quality start on the road. I mean, against three quality teams, right? So at OU, Nebraska, now USC. But I like USC's quarterback. And I like that USC's rush defense, I think, is just good enough to maybe slow down Michigan a bit, stop that rush defense, that offense just enough to give USC enough to cover this game. So I'll take USC based on quarterback, and I think the rush defense can hold up against Michigan.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I just think the more experienced quarterback, Underwood has played much better at home than on the road so far. And Mekhi Lemon's a difference maker on the outside. Two good running backs. We'll see how much they run the ball. I hope they do, because they're both really, really good there in this game. So I'm going with USC. All right, locks of the week. Who's got one?
I'm taking Liberty. I'm going to give the 1.5 against Utah.
Really? Wait a minute. Fraud alert. That game has been played.
Well, almost snuck it past you. You know what? We have some good-natured fun with Brian Kelly on this podcast on a weekly basis. We listen to him rant and rave, and it's all in good fun. But as a way to thank him, I'm going to take LSU, giving the 9.5 at home against South Carolina. Both teams are coming off bye weeks. I just think the extra time is going to especially help LSU, and it's no fun playing at Death Valley on a night game, and I don't think this is a place where South Carolina gets healthy. So I'm going to give the points and take the Tigers.
Pat, I'm a little disappointed that we did not have UMass Kent State on this.
That's true.
You know,
we
should have picked which is the worst team in FBS. The Golden Flash is favored by 3, by the way. Got to be favored for the first time since the Sean Lewis era, which is where I'm going, the former Kent State coach. San Diego State favored by a touchdown over Nevada. Wolfpack are going to start a true freshman quarterback for the first time since 2017. San Diego State's defense, I think that is the difference maker here. They're very good on third down. They're forcing teams off the field. I think they cover the 7.
Do we have any way of checking these games by the scores of Brian's games? Each week I'm astounded by the obscurity of a.
That's why he wins the locks, because they're so obscure. Nobody even notices.
Yeah, I've won one lock, so I guess I should shut up. Just shut up right now. So I'll do it.
I won my lock last week with Clemson, and I'm rolling with them again against Boston College. Clemson giving 14 on the road. BC's awful. Defense awful. And I do think Clemson has found itself a little bit. I still don't think they're great, but I think they're good enough to win by more than 14 points there. It is a missed opportunity for us to not pick Kent State, UMass in an absolute tire fire of a game. But the fact that Kent State is favored by 3 points tells you all you need to know there. So enjoy that game, everybody. All right, last thing here. We got to talk about this. Bay Area. We have a woman, Lisa Catalano, who got tired of trying to find love on the internet, on the dating sites, swiping left, right, whichever way you go. I'm not really even sure. And bought herself a billboard on Highway 101. And it says, marrylisa.com. Started up her own website where you can go and basically pitch yourself to Lisa. Got a nice picture of her, smiling picture. Looks like a very nice person. Guess this may shock you all. She's 42 years old from San Mateo. Not all of the responses were very nice. And not all the people, maybe the marrying types. So she apparently heard from 2,200 potential suitors around the world. Some possibly charming, some online bullies, some outright misogynists. I have to ask, fellas, if you were single, which none of us are, but if you were, would you go to marrylisa.com and make a pitch? Or, flip side, would you say marrygino.com or marrybryan.com? Would you go this route ever? Gene, I got to hear from you on this.
Oh, really? I have to go first on this?
Yeah.
Well, I have done this. I've had a series of billboard proposals, and it didn't go well, obviously. Look, I give Lisa a lot of credit. You know, I mean, it wasn't going the way she wanted, and she was proactive. She did something about it. Yes, we're going to have the fringe folks in there. Do we know if she actually found somebody that at least she might be dating, that there's hope?
She ended a relationship in April. That's actually when she started this. So I don't think she has yet found love. I believe she is still single. I don't know how much she's on the market.
I'm wishing Lisa the very best. And the fact that she made that kind of effort shows me that she's a sincere, wonderful person looking for a relationship that matters. And I'm wishing her the best. Good luck, Lisa.
I think some eyebrows certainly were raised amongst the producers of some of these shows out there on these reality TV shows, because that seems like the next step for Lisa is going on The Bachelor or Bachelorette or Love Island. What are some of the other ones? And this is not a genre.
Alcatraz Island.
Yeah, this is not a genre that I necessarily sit down and watch instead of watching another college football game. But kudos to Lisa for putting yourself out there. Number one, that takes a lot of guts. I'm sure it wasn't cheap to buy a billboard at all. I think you got to factor in the cost that the startup cost, if you will, there in the Bay Area to get over the line on this one. So kudos to that. But I think this has the first step in joining a reality TV show is the first thing that comes to mind for me.
That could be the end game here. It's a good thought. Good thing. She's certainly out there still talking about it. She says she got one application from Jesus Christ and 15 from Donald Trump. So I'm sure those were legitimate.
Okay.
I'm trying to find out that where this thing has actually ended up.
Well, give her a call.
Yeah.
You're heading to the West Coast, aren't you?
Yeah. I love going out there. But
you're going to the Oregon game.
I'm going. You know what? And here's the deal. She's in San Mateo. You go down. You do your Andrew Luck story, and you talk to marrylisa.com. So now we'll see. Maybe we'll get Lisa as a guest on the podcast to tell us about all this. Sometime.
She can do my locks of the week.
She might be better content than we are. So.
Absolutely.
All right, that's our show. That's enough, for God's sake. Enjoy the weekend, everybody. Great games, and we will be back to talk about them and whatever other shenanigans are going on college football next week. Thank you for listening.